too.
And when I'm cold, I'm
Yes. I think it's always cold on this third floor. Like you always have your air on up here.
well, it's because I'm hot all the time.
Well, Greg, let's think about a meeting on November 3rd.
Sounds good. Like my dad the same thing happened to him. He got
First.
he was at the house.
Yeah, I think he might have done a typo.
Oh, yes.
Third
Around
and
Christmas time.
About him not being able to make it?
yeah, bingo fest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just wanted to. Oh, Jennifer. Wondered why
Hey man, how's it going?
How are you?
Good. Good, good.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, you're back. How are you?
Portland probably always like it. It's like Centennial. Which anymore, Centennial all the way to Thornton is just good.
Oh, I heard from that, moving on the grants,
Oh, huh?
and she's gonna set up a call with someone that. Rate study.
Which grants and that's?
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, great.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing, I had.
Okay. Right. It doesn't require that in the code, I don't think. Okay, cool.
But I just want to give you a heads up before you about the next person.
You're not?
No, actually.
Anyway.
Oh. Sure.
And then I'd like to also give you
So our next meeting is where that has to start is
I know that there was a
on
lot of push toward opioid.
the 14th, and we'll take packets out next Tuesday.
Could be some money's out.
The last time I really liked to
do
have
know
things Friday, so do you think you can have
From that
it before
CNL
then?
meeting that I
Okay, I
went
think
to,
we're
I'll
actually
have
off
to
on
look
that
back
Friday
on
the
my.
10th, so if you have
I
it in
can't
before
remember if that
then,
was
I'll
something
put it on
that
the
we
agenda.
discussed the last time that's coming up on this next meeting.
Okay, and I just need to look at the statute, so I'll do that tomorrow morning for this, since it requires public hearings.
if you might, if you need,
does on
and I
the
will
schedule.
get you the
I'll look and see when
number.
it's.
Yeah, if it requires a public
I'll look and see when
hearing,
it's coming up.
let me have Georgie look at it, then we'll call you immediately, or maybe
There's a
after
big
this meeting,
form.
walk down with me.
Sure.
Let's look at it, and
Push
if it
across
does,
the
then we'll get the title of that public hearing.
country.
Because by 11 o'clock tomorrow is my time.
I don't know if there's any.
He's so short. There's more paper that says here's our meeting. So if it doesn't require public hearing, it's not a big deal. We just post our agendas. It does, okay.
Opioid issue.
Okay, it's a street name, Carlos?
That's just
It's a street name? Yes, sir. We're not.
Rana is asking. So was there ready to go?
Yes, okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Fred covered from over. So she has to pay for
Gotta go get some $6.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Check every month.
So
the costs are $40.
The one that from October 4th.
I brought mine.
I brought mine from the one that I was given.
I've had mine for a couple, 3 weeks.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, we got October 4th.
Yeah, October 4th. I think that might have been the night you were gone.
Go ahead, Mike, give her your opinion.
I'm just glad it's not Jonathan.
Hey Donna, do you have an extra copy of the, for Joe?
Budget?
No. I don't have it. I don't have any. Cheryl was gonna bring. I don't even have it. Did she bring any more up?
think
Yeah,
so.
Cheryl, I don't even have one for me.
Huh?
I don't even have one for me. Oh, sorry.
What's that? That's a true story. I don't know. Print it out.
That night that you weren't here?
Yeah.
Are we getting $1 to share, at least if we get it on the phone?
Yeah, it wasn't a Google Drive.
Steph,
Yeah.
Steph, personal phone.
Right.
I haven't looked at it.
That's where I got mine from. With all the other things that came with it. Did you notice that these numbers are much higher than last
Almost
year's?
30 years.
And there's less.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we found one pretty critical thing, so I just wanna, all I care about is that one critical thing. Oh, that's kind of lucky during budget season, Donna.
Right.
Summary.
But then the winter time, it's
You didn't have to have
All the
yeah, that's the only thing I'm gonna
instead of across the board.
But like,
Said we were gonna get additional funding.
actually, I'm sorry. Is that revenue?
That's true.
No, that's expense. This is revenue though. Need expense.
Is that last year?
This one's last year, yes.
I couldn't find mine.
So maybe it is less. I was looking at the revenue, but that's expense.
Business highlights are the things
Let's go and get started here.
Sorry.
we're supposed to get today.
No, here it is.
Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today's work session. It's November the 1st, 2017, time is now 3:30. Work session for the review of the draft 2018, now in session. So, let's go ahead and begin. I think the way we're going to approach this, Greg, first of all, we'll let you bring any information that you have for us.
Okay.
And also then I think what we'll do is we'll approach this as we go on. We'll start off with general fund, go across the board, and we'll do the next step. I think, were we going to get an additional sheet from
Yeah, you should be getting something.
I don't even know where Cheryl's at.
Cheryl? Well, I requested from Cheryl that she give us a synopsis instead of,
I'll drive you to
Copies
or
or
something,
something.
yeah.
To help.
so anyway, Greg, go ahead and,
Well, a major change in the way the budget looks this year is we've rolled the total cost of salaries in the general fund back into the general fund. They're allocated out all over the place, so that makes it look way different. It really doesn't change anything because it's but it reduces the reliance on the utilities to some extent. And then we've gotten rid of the non-discretionary costs department and allocated that throughout the budget too. So all of the employee-related costs are now spread out between all of the departments.
okay.
So between both of those can change the numbers in the individual departments, but what you really need to look at is the bottom line of the fund.
Exactly. So let's see where Cheryl's at. I'd like to see that sheet from Cheryl at first.
And then, we have a couple of requests that have come in recently, and I would just like to have, you consider them today. Tom Murphy has made a request for some funding, and so I asked him to make the request to you directly.
Okay.
And then, some of the other subsidies have been discussed also, and I think those will probably come up in the discussion.
Well, let's go ahead and, Tom, do you have a request? Why don't you go ahead and give us that request right away?
I was gonna go later. Had to get prepared. Guys, let me pass some things out to you. I couldn't get enough more of these made because room over at Cedar Street. You guys would share that. I gave one to Greg already.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I'm closer to Phil. Okay.
Give me a second to get organized. Oh, and that's two. That's the proposal.
Thank you.
Rick, you have yours. Oops, yeah, sorry. Okay. It'll take a minute to read that, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. But good afternoon. I'll try to do this quickly, guys, because I know you got a lot in front of you. So good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and staff. Number one, thank you for the interviews. That went really well. I've already started doing what I would like you to correct me on as I speak today. I didn't watch any of the interviews until they were over with, and I was aghast at how many times I said, I was taught in speech class as a freshman, don't do that at the University of South Dakota. So I was quite embarrassed when I watched myself. And raise your hand if you hear me say that, because I've written it down here not to do that. I'm a better interviewer than that. So today the presentation, should I just do it again? It's just automatic. The presentation is on two things today: economic development and transparency, and I'm going to be quick. Right now, it's my understanding that you have $3 million in economic development. That's for to retain businesses and to draw businesses into Trinidad. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of backstory. I'm kind of like Mr. Matei in that if you ask me what time it is, I'm going to tell you how to build the clock. And the only way I know how to give a speech is to tell stories. And so that's what I'm going to do, and it's never the same. So I just wrote down bullet points. 6-7 months ago, I was invited to Denver to be part of a panel at the Denver Open Media Foundation, which is also the Open Media Foundation, or they go by both names. I was on a panel with Andrew Romanoff, Bob Murphy, who is the mayor of either Littleton or one of the other communities, and two journalists, and the host, Tony Showcross. He's one of the directors of the Open Media Foundation in Denver. And what they are is they have two television channels like I do, and they film the legislature and about 15 to 18 other governmental entities, where they provide the software if the governments are taking care of it themselves. And while we're on the panel, I found out from Andrew Romanoff that he's the one that got the grants to begin filming the Colorado legislature in 2009. And at the time, one of the senators said, you need to tell me you want them to watch what we do here. And he's like, absolutely. And from that time on, and the evolution has been that more and more governments are being filmed. Because it's one thing to read about it in a paper or something that's paraphrased. It's a whole other situation to watch it. And I've been doing this on my dime and on my time for 12 years. But things have changed, as you'll see in the proposal. After the forum was over with, we were on live television and on the web and on the radio. They gave me a tour of the facilities, and it made me start thinking about what I'm doing here in Trinidad. They showed me some of the equipment that they have in the camera that I'm using right there, some that they use for other governments because it streams live. It goes directly, and so right now we are, of course, live. And so I started pondering about, what I could do, and I was going to make a proposal because the television is working underneath the corporation of the funeral home, and it has for the 12 years that I've had it. And I was meeting with my accountant last month, and I was showing her the things that I showed you, and she said, Tom, you can convert this to a nonprofit. And I thought, okay, she's an expert in this, and it's like, why not? And I hadn't given a proposal to Greg yet, so I rewrote it. And I thought, you know what, I do need to convert this. Chasing ad dollars to try to support what I'm doing is too much. And right now, governments are out there supporting their own transparency. So what I put in front of you is a proposal to say, you know what, I'm going to separate the television out, and I'm going to do it as a nonprofit. And when I did that, I don't know if some of you know, but I was actually the president of the YMCA, the president of the board. And from there, when Bill Quigley asked me to get on, I had no board experience. So I read as much as I could, and I learned policy governance, which is, as Greg knows, is one form of governing nonprofits and other governments. So I have a great deal of experience in doing this, and so I've gone to 3 good friends and said, would you consider being on board? So 3 of them agreed, and one is Judge Leslie Gerbal, the other is Joy Garble, President of International Bank, and the other is General Manager of Phil Long Toyota, Lisa Camarillo. They've all agreed to be a part of this. Now initially I was thinking, I will do this real quick like Rusty did for the downtown thing that they're doing. I'm like, no, I'm going to do this right, I'm going to do it slow, I'm going to form this corporation, this nonprofit with the right people, I'm going to film it as I go along so that people can get educated from this. So they've agreed, and I think it would benefit the city to look at the proposal and say, you know what, if you've got that much money in economic development, one of the things that I've been doing, and Paula, is our love of this community is we could have closed up shop and left after the newspaper closed. But we decided to fight it out. And let me tell you briefly what Paula's done. She interviewed with Phil Long for the marketing job over at Mount Carmel, and she got to the end, and Jay Shimino was the last interview. And got to the end, he says, I'm not going to hire you for this, you're going to go sell cars. She said, I don't want to sell cars. So he says, no, don't poo-pot it. It's a very good money if you do it right. And she's done that. And so she has gone from, the bottom of the barrel to, she's in the top 3% of all salespeople in Phil Long. And I, with the funeral home, we're doing everything that we can, as so many businesses are, to recover and to stay in Trinidad. I myself have put, and my father before me, close to $1 million in a 131-year-old historic building. So I've invested in Trinidad. And my commitment is to stay here for the next 30 years. So you might be seeing my face if you're on council for a while, for a long time if this works out. I know the city, and talking to Greg, said, well, maybe we could do this. And I thought about the city doing it, but realistically, do you guys, when you see the proposal, could you do this for $21,000? And if you could, would you go film the county meetings? Would you go film the ambulance and all these other entities? There needs to be, I'm getting a little cotton mouth. Give me 1 second.
It's Brendan.
Got a lot going on this afternoon. You guys always do make me nervous, by the way. So, as this for anybody who comes here and speak. So with that investment, and I think there needs to be a degree of separation with, the city and the filming and the ability to do this. And the other thing that I have that nobody else has is the television channel, which that there are elderly people in this community that aren't going to turn on a computer, that aren't going to find the YouTube channel or anything else. And those people are the ones that want to turn on the TV, they want to go to the channel, and it's there. And because I'm on call 24/7, and I have been for 30-some years, I'm always at my home, and if there's a problem with the audio or something like that, I can fix it. If somebody called me and said, hey, it's not coming through, and that has happened in the past. So I think that I have the go ahead.
Shit,
What's that?
shit, you said you
Thank you. I'm just going too fast. Anyway, so one of the things that we're going to do, this is economic development. I'm just going to start speaking from the heart. I have so much space over at the funeral home that we utilize for the newspaper that is not being used now. And as I took a tour of the Denver Open Media, I realized that, for a small community, I have all this unused space that currently I'm using now for studios. Some of you have been in there and been interviewed. We have the kitchen, we have another giant room, and we have where the newspaper was. So I have the space in order to bring more people in. And we're going to go out in search of more grants. This is just going to be the cornerstone of what could be the beginning of bringing back more jobs to Trinidad. As Mr. Bonato pointed out in his interview, we've lost several jobs in the city from the sewer plant. Well, nonprofits have so much money, they're practically throwing it at you. I've just made a mistake in the last 12 years of thinking that I could monetize this by going around and getting advertisers, and it's just, there's too much competition right now, so it's not gonna work. And one of the things that we did, and that I wanna do with this, is the type of things like educational videos. What have I done for the last 12 years? Well, I've filmed government, and I have nonprofit experience. One of the things that I wanna do with this is educational videos. One of the things that we did for the tourism board back in 2011 was frontline training. Now, unfortunately, because turnover at the board and everything, these were never utilized. We have a box over in the other building of 100, 125 of these that were never used. I'm gonna ask the tourism board at the next meeting if I can post this on YouTube. We used Harriet Bourgeois and Fred and some of the actors, and it's a half-hour presentation to the JRs and the other places to say, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to teach your people. So the opportunities are endless, and all I'm doing is saying, guys, if you've got money in economic development, this may not come out of your general fund, that'll be a decision for you and the city manager, at least consider it, because it was an aha moment a month ago when my accountant said, you can convert this. And I kept pushing on for 12 years thinking, I'll make this work one way or another. And it was that moment that I said, hey, last thing, when I talked to Greg, he said, Tom, is the stuff that you have, is it WCAG compliant? Because I guess there's an issue with the websites and stuff. So I emailed Tony Showcross at the Denver Open Media yesterday, and this is his response. Tom, there have been more Department of Justice situations like this. There's not a streaming archiving solution anywhere that meets all the items of the WCA checklist, and he gives me the checklist for that. But we are working on them and definitely meet as many as any provider at a fraction of their price. I haven't personally gone to the checklist to say where we are and are not compliant, but our main web developer has, and he has compliance on his list of development properties. But no timeline just yet on when we expect to get there. This is the software that I will use that you'll have ownership of. Once we start filming, if you agree to this, the videos from that point forward, you will own. You can download if you choose. It'll be a searchable database where you can search keywords and phrases and things like that. And it's evolving. So the thing is, it costs $6,000, but they have matching grants at $3,000, and I put that into the proposal. So that's it in a nutshell. And I took a little bit longer than what I planned on, sorry.
Okay.
And thank you for the water.
Yeah, you're welcome. Jonathan, on that note, come forward, please. Are there any particular issues that money would come out of ED?
So for clarification, Mr. Murphy is my landlord, so I just want everyone to know that for the record. In terms of the finances, no, there is no limitation based on that. It serves not only a public good, but also a broadcast benefit, which we would like Mr. Murphy to continue, if he could, to search out advertisers, to defray some costs, because we always want our businesses to find alternate sources of revenue. But in the grand scheme of things, no. I mean, he'd be eligible.
So really what it sounds like is just a decision from probably Greg, because it's within your budget amount, to be able to convert that money into what, am I correct? Or, because I don't think you need anything from council per se?
No, not per se, but I was thinking of it possibly as being funded out of marijuana, and that's why I brought it to.
Any particular reason for that?
Well, ED is cash, that's not revenue. The reserve is cash.
So we were talking about this year's budget is different than next year's budget, is where I'm getting confused. Next year's budget, we do have $237,000 allocated, but then the ED reserve fund is cash. So we did budget for certain items like this in the normal budget, but wherever Mr. Sun wants to take it from is up to city management.
Because, we've been talking about trying to utilize some of the money for debt, for pay off the debt. If we took this, 23,000, it would just take away from that money to pay off some other debt. That's the question that comes to mind.
Well, there are other things that we need to talk about, like, for instance, one thing we didn't maybe work into it enough too is the need to put money into ADA improvements.
Okay.
We may have to push some items off for a year or two in order to do more of that. Because the problem is that is not going away. We potentially, if we don't do things in a timely manner, we're going to pay for the improvements plus pay fines on top of it. And that just makes no sense to me.
And I think in our budget here, as we go along, there's probably some ADA discussion that we'll have in the back end here.
Yeah.
Cheryl, do you have a summary for us?
I just have the budget detail, which, on each, so for each,
I know each individual department.
right, each department is represented with revenues and expenditures, and
Right,
it's,
I saw that. I was just looking for an entire summary on the one sheet is what I was hoping for.
I didn't.
Let me ask you this question. Like I said, I didn't put the numbers together from each department, revenue versus expenses. Do you have that you can give us?
Yeah, they're on each sheet, you should see,
Well, they're on each sheet, but I'm looking at as a composite. To look at all the departments, where there's general fund versus any revenue versus expenses overall. So so what's our overall budget that you come up with? 40?
okay. So I was gonna treat these individually, just a second.
I guess what I'm looking for is just to see if we have a balanced budget overall. As a composite.
It's different. Essentially, every fund under the city is a different organization.
Right, and there's just,
So you can't throw those all together and get a balanced budget out of
well,
it.
just to know if our revenues versus our expenses across the board are,
So if you can flip to the Power and Light Fund,
right,
you'll see the total revenues and the total expenses. And at the very bottom, you'll see that we are dipping into reserves to cover Power and Light.
right, I saw that.
Okay,
Okay.
that's how I would present. I did not summarize it. Just,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because capital, utilities are very capital intensive, so you're going to have to spend cash balance occasionally when you have a large project.
I was just looking for overall the broad spectrum of things. If our expenses are, 39 million across all departments, everybody, and our revenues are the same amount. That's what I was looking for. Or if one was lopsided from me, that's what I was looking for.
Okay.
So we wouldn't treat them like that. We have to treat
Right.
them separately.
You do have to treat them separately.
We do.
But just
So-
from our perspective, just to see an overall, that's what I was looking
Okay.
for. I'm not sure what confidence about that.
I think I know what he's trying to ask for. Basically, if you can put things from general fund and capital funds, and then have a slight breakdown from there of expenses versus revenues, just,
Across the board.
You want all funds and
All
two
funds.
numbers, basically.
I think that's
Yeah,
correct what you're asking.
All funds across the board.
Mhm.
So anyway, we don't have that, so let's go ahead and move forward.
Would the demonstration of information as provided, segregated as you're proposing, be any different than what Phil is asking for in total?
I would just take each sheet and put them
So
on one page.
what your calculations as they presently are, designed and written, will just provide Phil with the information, the nutshell that he's looking for?
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we move on, we have, the people from, AADA or ADA here. I'm not sure if they want to come forward. Do you have anything you want to recognize that you are here? Anything, Charlene, that you want to talk about?
Well, I'm not totally prepared to do a presentation, but if I have a moment, I would like to address you.
Sure.
Members of council, as you all know me, I'm Charlene Torres, I'm Director of Advocacy Against Domestic Assault, and I just have a concern that I'd like to address with the city, and that concern, of course, is funding. For a number of years, probably 10, 15, 20 years, we have always been allowed the opportunity to come before you to make a presentation and to seek funding from the city of Trinidad. As you're aware, Ada has been providing critical services since 1983 to victims of domestic violence and their children. The services we provide are critical and oftentimes life-saving, and they certainly enhance and improve the well-being of victims of domestic violence, male, female, and their children. Last year we provided 2,211 nights of safe shelter for families in this community alone. But in 2016 we came before the city and asked for funding. We never did receive any kind of response, and we never did receive any kind of funding. So I became concerned when in 2017 we had not been invited to come and prepare a presentation to the city. I made several phone calls and was told that the city was doing something possibly different this year, and that not to concern myself because I hadn't missed the date or I hadn't missed the letter or whatnot. Well, again, it came and passed, and we never were asked to come and do a presentation. I did read in the newspaper that some of the funds for nonprofits were going to be channeled through, I believe, the Community Foundation, and that I believe there was a limit of $2,000. It was probably my misunderstanding or my assumption that those funds were going to be used for nonprofits that possibly hold annual events or something like that, because it was such a small amount. So I waited and did not hear anything. Unfortunately, Councilman Fletcher, was the person who got the brunt of my concerns, and I think that she brought that to you. But I am concerned. We did not get funded in 2016 or 2017. It does not look like we're going to be funded in 2018. And I just stress to you that the importance and the critical need that this community has for victims of domestic violence and their children. We provide services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with no cost to the victim whatsoever.
Actually prior to 2017, council took it upon themselves to review all the grants. And it was pretty much a day-long process, from my understanding. So when the previous city manager was here, he said, well, we'd like to take that off of the council's plate. And they gave $20,000 to the Trinidad Community Foundation. They advertised for any nonprofits to come forward and bring their applications. So I think that's probably where that, you may have not seen it or caught it too late, but that's what happened. Going forward, I'm not sure where we're going with this, Greg, on this particular part of it.
Well, one thing that I noticed in looking through this is that the Community Foundation grant program had a maximum payout of $2,500. And so I'm not sure that this program should have been grouped into that, because it's greater than $2,500. So that was, to me, that was more for just the small miscellaneous things.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I mean, ever since I've been sitting on council, I have to echo Charlene's causes here. When we used to sit as a council and listen to all the nonprofits out there state their cases where the money's going to go to and whatever. And I was kind of shocked when that $20,000 was given out, and some of these nonprofits were left out. And it's an important thing that I would look into, is that these nonprofits should go back there like they used to be before, and come to the Facing Council and ask what we can do. I think our ex-city managers kind of just, I don't know what he did or what he wanted to do, but took this pressure off us, which I don't think was very much more pressure than what we're under to do this. So I think it's important for all our nonprofits, when this comes to being at the end of the year, or whenever we have to do this, to be here, to ask their request and go on from there.
Good.
I have an observation. I thought what you'd done is we had taken things where people were performing services for the city, like Noah's Ark, and we made line items out of them.
True.
Perhaps this should be a candidate for a line item, because it is a service to the city. It's a social service.
And I take full responsibility for not bringing that up before this point, and I hope it's not too late. It should have probably already been discussed, and I apologize for that. That's all.
I concur that those substantive service providing agencies such as AIDA and Noah's Ark and such are more integral to the city than are some of the lesser ones. And for that reason, they should be included as a line item. I disagree with Councilman Bernal because I believe in the interest of community governance and such. It's prudent and wise to include other people in making some of these decisions for lesser amounts. That having been said, Charlene, before 16 and 15, how much were you receiving from the city? Do you recall? Ballpark.
It recently reduced because the city
At
didn't
its
have
highest,
funding,
at its-
about $7,000 a year.
That's a nominal amount considering the service she provides.
And she goes after the difference with grants.
Yeah.
She does.
Works herself.
Would you go for a line item on
I think that's probably not a bad idea, anything, I think maybe we could do is set a dollar amount, whether it's 5,000 or 3,000, that, like this for a line item, anything under that could be a grant, like was done in this past year. I'm not sure what council thinks about that, but that's up to you guys. That's how it's, but that would be some discussion.
Because we did choke off some of those contributions to the nonprofits when we were, I remember we were scrambling that first budget year just to try and make ends meet.
I agree with you, that's a service to the city, not as much as, yeah, and maybe we need to consider changing that.
And are there others that we're overlooking at the moment? Not two.
Well, there's several others that, provide these kind of services for us that are nonprofits in our city.
Which one? What about, we're talking about maybe large service providers. ADA is a large service provider.
Detox is one.
Detox, that
that's
might be
another
good.
one, yeah.
So we're looking at people that would come before us that ask for large amounts. So I think maybe the smaller amounts, like we're talking the 2,000 and less, or whatever, might be something different. I'm not sure what you're.
I definitely think that we need to put something up to the public though, whether in publication or on the radio, to let them know that we have an opportunity for them to come and speak their part. Otherwise, we'll have a day like this again next year where people are like, well, we didn't know that we were supposed to do this. And it's gotta be both parts working together where entities come forward and ask, and we also put it out that we are willing to hear a plea.
Agreed, and to your point, the previous proposal made by Mr. Murphy would suggest that we get that kind of correspondence.
Yeah, to read out, an application from his end in this particular case.
My point was just the service that he plans to provide would avail the public as Carlos has suggested.
Somebody mentioned the detox center.
I did.
Yeah, I was talking with Amanda Gordon there. Someone came to me with an idea about a methadone program.
Right.
And she said she's thrilled. She thought she could get some state funding for it, but it might require some matching funds from them and from the city. So I just want to bring that up as long as we're talking about it.
Interesting segue.
So here's the big question, the big dollar question is what kind of dollars do we have for grant funding as a whole? Is it 30,000, 40,000, 50,000? That's the big question.
I guess that is a concern of mine. If you just open this up, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, are you looking at adding 5 more organizations, 10, 15?
I guess we have to discuss it.
Because
Do you have the way things used to be before we started having terrible budget problems?
Let me go.
I guess I'd
Would
like
that
to
be
go
like
back to
this?
that.
This is last year's.
No, I'm talking about
Oh.
Ed.
I think that
It's about 13 organizations.
Well, I thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Charlie, for bringing it to our attention.
Can I ask you a question? If you were granted some financial resources, what exactly are you asking for?
Well, I don't know. I mean, right now, we are about $30,000 short in our budget for 2018. That was due to some lack of funding, through no cause of our own, but just because of the culture of the nonprofit world right now. That's where we are. But our funding changes, our needs change from year to year.
But you're at the point of having to lay people up, and that's where it's critical.
We are cutting hours now.
Yeah.
We're still doing the same amount of service, we're still providing 24 hours a day, but we are having to cut people's hours. This is the first time I've ever had to do this in 30 years. And it's real troubling for me to do that. I understand too that we also rely on volunteers. Volunteers cover our crisis line over the weekend and overnight. So we have a lot of support. I have letters of support if you'd like to see them. But I respectfully ask that you reconsider and that you understand the service that this agency brings to this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
When, there are considerations for furlough days, and you look at the things that, a distinction is
We
made.
don't need to I'm sorry, go ahead. Do your sidebar, go ahead.
A distinction is often made between essential and non-essential services. It is my opinion that in the interest of the quality of life, public safety and the like, what Charlene provides to domestic violence people are victims, the efforts put forth by Detox and as proposed by Councilwoman Miles, the detoxification of opiate addictions, methadone and the like, is one of those essential services. Noah's Ark is an essential service. Funding theater programs and the like are, in my mind, perhaps not as critical to the public safety of the city and maybe lesser essential. And I don't mean anything derogatory in making that statement. Okay, I don't want to make an enemy of the folks from the theater productions. But at the same time, I think that's how we need to make these distinctions.
Greg, you told me at one point, where would that come in our budget, such things as essential services?
Well, I don't know about essential services, the subsidies that we'd be
Yeah.
paying out to organizations, we would be putting them under this contract services.
Contract, that's what you said, contract
go.
services.
So I feel like they're in the
So-
last year's budget right here.
I think
Okay.
maybe you and Audra can go through that and see what things were like before we started having big budget problems.
How far is that?
Because I'm not sure we need to decide that tonight.
Yeah,
No,
the
we
one
have a lot
thing-
to get through.
The one thing to keep in mind is our budget's eased up a little bit, but we have really tried not budgeting much of the marijuana revenue to operations,
Point made.
because we just don't trust it yet as a reliable revenue.
Yeah.
But if, we are getting more money from marijuana, so if you want us to start throwing that into the operations, we can do that.
No, I think that we leave marijuana money as it is because it's volatile.
But without that, we aren't up a tremendous amount in revenue.
I think what we use marijuana for is, like we talked about, cutting some of our debt. And I think maybe we could take some of that money, utilizing it for like maybe some of these services as well, that we might consider some of them.
Well, when I talk about marijuana in the general fund, I'm talking primarily what it's driving with the sales tax, because that's still a marijuana revenue. And we're targeting most of that still towards the capital side of the budget, fleet, that kind of stuff, because
One-time
if it has to go, it can go pretty easily, but if you start to sink it into operations, it really has a dramatic effect.
Yeah, I think sinking in operations is not good.
We could maybe look at doing some of it towards some of the subsidies, as long as if it doesn't show up, we're willing to say no.
I think maybe one of the things that we could do, we've discussed this, is we won't know until January, how much marijuana revenue we actually have. We've already expended some. We know what we anticipate we want to spend.
But, like our general sales tax is up considerably,
Right.
and but we think it's driven mostly by that.
Right.
I probably pushed Cheryl a little harder than she wanted to say general business has increased as a result of what's going on. I think there's, just talking to people, there's far more activity in town, and so our sales tax is up, not directly related.
Well, what I was thinking of is that instead of sticking, like for instance, Ada or any of these others into a line item at this point in time, I'm not sure council would consider waiting till we see what our marijuana fund revenues will be. And then taking, like we did at our retreat, finding and saying, okay, we want to put 5,000 to Ada and another 5,000 to somebody else and whatever, just to kind of break it down that way, kind of a one-time thing, because all of these revenues, it's going to ebb and flow. I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
Well, I think there's a certain critical point that she's making efforts for this.
Sure.
And that plays heavily into our decision. But more, in addition to that, as you were speaking, it occurred to me that I think, I was just made aware of financial statements from Noah's Ark, and I was quite surprised to find out their financial situation when held in comparison to the large amount of money that they're thinking about funding them. I'm thinking, that maybe is something that needs to be revisited, and some of that could go in Monument Lake, for example, add to that, or to fund those center programs. At least for this one-time infusion until we can get a better system in place. And consistent with that thinking, I think that there needs to be a dialogue of exchange of what is financial statements from both people requesting funds, so that we have a better understanding of what their exact situation is. I was confused. I was surprised that Noah's Ark is as flushed as it seems to be.
Keep me in line on what my suggestion was, or what's your thoughts, Dan?
I have I'm sorry.
We're down the line? Okay. I think with, for example, with Ada and as well as the detox center, if they provide service to the city, I would like to see them in the budget. I'd like to see them actually be a line item.
Well, one thing Cheryl just pointed out to me though is, although they didn't apply for it this year, for the 2016 projected budget, there was going to several small things. It was $20,850. So, you know, I don't know if all of that was rented out.
So the way I understand it is $20,800 was budgeted each year, but then it just got wrapped up into one line item to be distributed by Trinidad Community Foundation, $20,000.
It didn't go very far. Didn't go as far. We're looking at the 2016 budget under community services. Ada got 7,000, 14, 15, and then 16 was the last year. And then there's nothing projected, I don't think.
Because when you look at it here, they were
Yeah.
supposed to be part of that 20,000.
And it got switched over to,
So everything was right here?
Yeah.
So they all individually, and then they all went to TCF.
yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, 2016 was the end, yeah.
So the fact that they didn't apply it for it is probably why they didn't get it.
Right.
But it was also limited to 2,500.
I think it was.
Yeah.
That's what I
So
read.
it was.
So, there may have been a real miscommunication here.
Yeah, I think we should take that out and make it a line item, ADA. What's the other one? Youth Advisory Council, what is that?
That's Charlie's, the police departments.
Maybe those two items should be out of it.
Because they're bigger.
Because they're bigger. All the others are under 5,000 bucks.
Detox used to be in here too, and they haven't been in for a while. Oh, here's Crossroads.
Yeah,
No, they're up there.
Yeah.
I don't know what they got in 2017.
So
They got 25,000.
But one way we can do that is, for that 20,000 that the community foundation does, just cut that back by 14,000 and make those two specific subsidies. And then it nets out.
Thank you, Phil, for
Anything
that.
else on that?
So that could be done without really any change.
I have something I'd like to bring up too, and go ahead.
I'm a little bit confused by the information that we have here. I don't see any beginning fund balance and ending fund balance in what I'm looking at. Am I missing a piece of paper?
I haven't projected, I mean, I have ending fund balance, I just haven't put it on
On this?
the sheet, and it just, yeah, I can get, I'm
Okay.
still working on the statement of revenues.
All right,
and
I'd
expenses.
love to see that because I'm very concerned about some of the infrastructure funds in the enterprise.
And if I'm bringing this up at the wrong point, tell me. It's kind of relative to community services, like we were just discussing. I would like to start bringing up the fact that Terra Firma was not funded at all last year, and I believe the year prior. And Mr. Sund and I have been having conversations about maybe getting them into the budget because we're trying to eliminate how much recyclable material is going into the landfill, so we can make the length of the lifespan of the landfill longer. We had a meeting with Terra Firma, and they said that about 40 to 50% of the material that an independent contractor came in and did a core sample found that material was recyclable. So is this a place where I can bring that up to, because it's part of the community services where they do provide a service for the community?
Well, that's good. I think what I wanted to do is start the beginning with the general fund and kind of.
Okay, I didn't know, because we kind of went into this and I don't want to not say anything.
But yeah,
Okay.
keep that in the back of your head.
Okay.
Just one question.
Sure.
You know, we used to get an annual report about our sales tax, how much it was, you know, what we were making. I haven't seen no report on what our sales tax is up to date right now. Is it up 10%? Is it up 20%? Or
Yeah,
I think we just had that.
We
can
receive
get
it
that.
periodically.
did I miss that one?
You might have missed it, yeah.
What
Yeah.
was it?
I think it was like up 16%, I think, over last year.
It was up 16%.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Well, let's go ahead and get started, I guess, from the top down here with the general fund revenue summary. And we have a revenue of $12,297,000 and expenditures of $12,256,000. If you have any questions concerning any particular item that you want to address, Mr. Miller, do you want to address any of the items?
Not right now, sir. I'd like to just listen to what they have to present to us here.
Mr. Miles, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm trying to tie this all together. And what I saw some of the questions that Mr. Sund emailed to us that you had asked, Mr. Lopez. And I'm not sure I understood all of that. What are the position allocations that seem to have?
Position allocations was something in this year's budget, and I think also in 16's budget. And essentially what that is the amount of several salaries across the city in the general fund were charged directly to the utilities. And so it doesn't show up as a transfer or anything else because the salaries are getting charged.
So now instead of allocating, say, well,
so it end up, you end up charging the utilities without making it real obvious.
okay, so the 227 increase in the city manager's budget was previously being allocated to the fund.
Yes.
Okay, now instead we're just doing pilot payment in lieu of
Right,
taxes.
and so it shows up in specific numbers on the revenue side of the budget.
So is that in the area consistent with general government line item 4132, where you now have $2.5+ million under that line item versus last year we were at 173,000 projected, 192 budgeted.
2 million of that is the marijuana money, the 5% sales tax.
Okay,
We did not have that budgeted before,
Okay.
and so that just puts it in place.
all right, we have service reimbursement for all the funds as well as pilot, right? For 18?
No, we aren't using we aren't using that position allocation.
It says service reimbursement, power and light, 164,950.
So what we did is we took the staff that are directly related to any of the utility funds, which would include accounts payable, my office, or me, and purchasing, anybody that has anything to do with all of the utilities at once. Greg, Audra.
And there is there's a justifiable amount. I have a spreadsheet that shows what percent is charged to each of the utilities, rather than just making it charge large amounts. You can see exactly what is charged.
Okay, is 572,588 comparable to 1,183,300? Or are they apples and oranges?
Which line item are you on?
2017 projected and 2018 budget. And it looks like we're allocating into the utility, the enterprise funds, an extra $600,000. We're sucking money out to the tune of $600,000. And I'm trying to figure out why that would be. We didn't need to do that last year.
We've reduced how much is coming out of the utilities by about $500,000 this year.
Okay, if you look at revenue source, operating transfers in, we've got 2017 projected of 572,588. Okay, The budget has 1 million.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, if you take salaries and directly charge them to the utilities, they don't show up anywhere.
They don't show up as accounts.
So that was $800 and some thousand that just was directly charged to the utilities, and they don't show up as a transfer item.
Is that why, like, say for the water expense, we had nothing right there?
Part of that is because we're splitting the funds apart.
So you're saying that we're not transferring in to the general fund a service reimbursement of 164,950.
No, we are transferring that in. That's becoming a number that's, you can see on paper now. When you were doing position allocations, it doesn't show up.
Okay, so 2017 projected is not the same animal as 2018 budget.
Right.
They're apples and oranges.
They're apples and oranges.
Okay, I got it.
Any other questions?
I think the number was close, it was $800 and some thousand in position allocation.
I have it downstairs, I don't have it total. So Mayor, I don't know if that's what you were talking about, something as simple as, revenue versus expenses.
Right.
And I'm guessing by the spreadsheet you have in front of us, the reason why we have the negative numbers is because the year is not complete.
Nope, the reason is because we're overexpending, we were anticipating larger expenses versus revenue, which means we'll be dipping into fund balance. However, if you wanted to take power and light, for example, at the very bottom, you'll see revenues less expenses, $780,000 on your printout.
What page?
Page, this one. Is that a number? It doesn't have a number.
It's page 4.
Page 4?
Fourth page.
You're looking at Power Life Fund?
Yes.
So you'll see our 2018 budgeted revenues, 7.4 million, and our expenditures, 8.2. We are dipping into reserves by, so technically revenues or expenditures exceed revenues by $780,000, but $345,000 of that is capital outlay, which goes back into our financials as an asset. So technically $780,000. Do you have the statement copy, Michelle?
It's actually the third, I think.
Here, another copy, I think she's got hers separated. You have another.
She can have this.
Yeah, she does.
It's on it.
That's what it is. Got the pages next to it.
Okay, now that I'm on the same page, can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry. You have 7.4 for the revenue, and projected expenditures are 8.2. 8.3 is what I have in mind.
I think 247. You're not looking at the same one we are. He's looking at a different document.
Oh, I see. Okay, I don't have that one.
Audra handed this out right when we
Just
got
before the meeting
upstairs.
started.
Oh, I thought that was the same as what I
No,
had.
it isn't.
Oh, sorry then.
New and improved.
New and improved, okay.
One of the items on there is a concern, and I'm not sure, where are we going to fund the Welcome Center from?
We are going to be funding the Welcome Center out of the Tourism Fund.
Okay. And we talked about that, but I just want to make sure that was still the same.
Yeah. And that's also the reason that I asked you to consider paying off the last payment, or the remainder of the trolley, because if those payments keep coming out of the tourism fund, it will overextend the fund.
I have a question regarding the Power and Light Fund.
This we're going to the fund, we're just doing
Oh.
the general fund at this point.
Okay. Sorry.
I was wondering, do we see that big of a drop in license and permit funds from this past year, we're almost cutting it in half. I'm not sure if that would be something Mr. Beach might have any thoughts or.
Well, a big part of that was, you have permits for roofs,
Okay,
and that drove that number quite a bit.
okay. That's true, yeah.
But we're not seeing it come in at the same rate as you thought.
I have a couple questions regarding general fund, so that I'm on the same page as everybody. Our police department looks like it's getting an increase of about $250 or so $1,000. Is that to increase our payroll, or what are all?
A big part of that is putting the employer-related costs for employees back into the department.
Okay. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's about $400,000.
And that happens to all of the
Not more.
departments. You'll see pretty much across the board that the departments are increasing because we're taking money out of that non-discretionary and applying them to the fund, to the departments.
So is that the same kind of sentiments then for Parks and Rec, where they're going from 286 to 429?
Yeah, actually, Parks and Rec, I think if you don't consider that one down, 50-some thousand.
It's 327, actually the budget's, so you wanna be looking at the 2017 budget, 327, and it's going to 429, and that's exactly why. It's for health insurance, or, all employee benefits.
Okay.
So what I think I understand you to say is it's not necessarily increases, it's just money shown in different locations.
Yeah, we're trying to apply them to the departments
So
that
that
they're
it's
operating
better
out of. So
understanding of what we're doing.
Right, so you can see what the true cost of operating the
Because
department.
if this is held separately, then we don't get a true picture of what it takes to operate that particular department.
So that's where most of these increases that we're showing across in the different line items, for instance, here, I'm looking at the city attorney cost.
All of the added costs that we pay for an employee are now being charged to the department.
Well, that does make sense.
Yes, if you take a look at, under general government, about the 7th line down, non-discretionary costs, you'll see that we did budget 1.7 for 17, and now we've budgeted 0.
Correct.
So all of that's been worked back into departments.
So we have no contingency on that in the general fund?
Yes, contingency is 123,000, it's at the very bottom.
That shows 0 on mine. Where's the budget for 2018?
I think it's
Is
another
it-
You
So-
got the old one too.
Oh,
There's a new one today, Phil.
No, okay, maybe that's what I'm missing.
I'm reading off notes from the one that goes October 4th.
Okay,
right.
that's what I'm missing. Okay.
This is completely different. This one is in our drive, October 4th.
Oh, no, we didn't put this in your drive, we finished it today.
I know.
Can I get one of those
But I have my
ones then?
comments on the
Yeah,
document that's from
looks like
October
we
4th.
need some ones here too.
This would have been nice to see.
Okay. Well, at least I know that there's something for contingency. Anything else on capital?
Well, I have on general fund.
Oh, excuse me, John, sorry about that.
I noticed landfill disposal fees are way down from 2016 actual. It was over 500. Now it's projected to be 385.
Same thing, we had a tremendous increase because of disposal of roof products.
Okay.
If you look back in time, the number we have there is tracking closer to, if you go back 1 year, is when it starts to track more accurately.
So if I went back to 2015, it would track.
You're getting closer, because 15 is also when the rates were increased.
Okay. Property taxes are way up. Is there, I mean, we went from 858 projected to 993 budget?
That was, I believe that they under budgeted, just, I'm actually going across the board as an average, so I'm gonna budget pretty much what we anticipate. We'll probably receive a little bit more because I am conservative, but you'll see that in 2016, we received 1 million, and I'm budgeting 993,000.
Okay, so 2017 is projected at 858, and the budget is 993.
But looking at the 2016 actual,
Well, I understand, but what's happened where we're going back to 2016 normal instead of 2017 normal?
When we calculated the 17 projected, we just took what we received through June and doubled it, but we've received remainder of taxes, I
Oh,
think actually.
okay.
So
So it's gonna be
a
closer
lot
to
of
that
time the
million.
projected it's a really hard number to grab. I'll probably be polishing that up before we do the final,
Okay.
so that because we're closer to the end of the year and we can
Gotcha.
get more correct numbers.
Okay.
I want to interject something just to point it out from the library. That pro rata share, that's the city taxes, that's the property taxes. I want to point out the county pays no taxes towards the city, just as a point of reference. I mean, towards the library. Nothing. But you know, never has. Never has.
You're looking also at, and that's fleet. Economic development, dropping about almost $60,000 off of ED. Is it because maybe we didn't use that much in ED from this last year? Is that kind of the reason why?
One of the reasons the main drops was because we actually now have a 29% vacancy rate in our downtown. And a lot of that funding last year went towards the business rental assistance. And so conservative, whatever we don't use will go into the ED reserve fund for future expenditures. But if vacancy rates do go back up, then we can always allocate more out of that ED reserve fund.
Is that a program we plan to implement again next year? The rental assistance program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the 2017 budgeted amount for ED was $789,000, and at that time there was discussion of purchasing land for development for restaurant or something else that may be coming to Trinidad.
This goes on the power line. Anything else on general fund?
The one thing I pointed out a little while ago, but I want to make sure you notice is the total amount for the fund is at $12,300,000. And a big reason for that jump is the 2,100 in there for the marijuana sales tax.
Right.
So that when you take that out of the equation, it comes pretty close to last year. Or 217.
All right, let's go on to the Power and Light Fund. Just out of curiosity, it's across the board around $40,000 on average of penalties. What kind of penalties are we on the revenue side? What is that?
It's utility customers that are past due.
Okay, past due?
Yes.
So I thought it was just.
Are we going in order or just
Yes,
jump in?
Mr. Bernard, do you have anything?
Go ahead.
Street lighting is way down from.
It's because we've switched to LED lights, so it's reduced the revenue on the power side. But it also reduced
Reduced
our
the
costs on the
expense,
general
right.
fund side, so.
Yeah.
Understood. So we adjust our rates based upon our cost for the street lighting.
Well, we charge the general fund for street lights, but we're charging the general
I got you.
fund less money for street lights because they're more efficient lights.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For the expenditures that we have listed, training/travel and mileage, I saw that we had budgeted this year $4,500. Next year it's $1,300. I'm sorry, $13,000. Are we expecting more training, seminars, things to that effect that are going to be justifiable for those increases?
Yes. Those are for Mesa Hotline School. We send our linemen and jurymen to it's actually in Grand Junction. They're hoping to get one in Springs, but yes, to keep them trained and safe.
Is that a once a year typical thing or once every few years?
We like to rotate our crew through there, like send 2 or 3 a year.
Okay.
So,
And I noticed that we also don't have a clothing allowance this year. Is there any particular reason why?
It's been moved to a couple of departments below.
Where's that
It
at?
was calculated in admin, but Mike doesn't work anymore.
right, I didn't.
Okay. I just want to make sure they're going to have shirts.
I was going to get some new suits, but you know, for some reason it was in the admin side, and we just wanted to correct that and put it on the,
It's,
on
it's been moved to
Working side.
distribution.
the, right.
It's kind of similar to the vehicle maintenance, the diesel and that, they kind of,
Yeah.
or you flip-flop that.
Right.
Which
We're trying to see actual expenses on where they go.
Mhm,
Not,
that makes sense.
on the street, getting charged to the admin. We want to
Okay.
get a good.
Something that I noticed across the board, go ahead, you know. Something that I was gonna ask, and across the board, all through the departments of, all the utility funds. Our bad debts, it's pretty high. Are we doing anything, are we planning on doing anything for collection of these? Do we have an outside source that we're looking at, or are we gonna try to do something in-house for collection across the board? Because these are funds that we need to try to collect somehow. And I think that any people that are outstanding for very long, you know, they need to get cut off.
They are.
We are getting far more aggressive now.
We need to be.
Yeah.
Ruthie does send, she tries to do it quarterly to write off that bad debt, and she sends them to Wakefield and Associates. They are a collection agency.
Okay.
But currently, we've strategized to try to get those people that have high arrears, they're at least 1.5 months behind. I sent out a letter saying, this is it, October 31st, you need to come in and pay. We sent about 43 letters, and as of this morning, we only have 11 scheduled for turn off tomorrow.
So you have like a month and a half before you, for notification? Is that what you're trying to do?
We're trying to get the ones that are very past due, and then we'll work toward getting the people that are 45 days past due. We're gonna give them that final shut off, and we're gonna shut off.
Okay, the using.
Too easy on some people.
Right, the Wakefield and Associates, how long have we been using them?
I can't say. I don't know.
It's been years, but once it goes there,
Yeah, you
we
can-
collect like half.
Right.
Yeah, we don't get very much,
Yeah,
so
that's-
we wanna do everything we can to collect the money ourselves before.
I do have a lot of experience in collecting bad debts. I'm aware of, them issues. And, the thing about it is once, I'm not sure if Wakefield does this, is once it's in their hands and they come in and pay, you're not allowed to take collection from them. Usually they have to pay them first. I'm not sure if Wakefield works differently or not. It just depends on the
Yeah, it
collection.
has to go to them once we turn it over.
Sure.
It just depends on the agreement.
So
Whatever, I
the,
just
we've
looking
kind
at,
of-
overall
sorry.
across the board, I just looking at the amount of bad debts that we're budgeting for is extremely high. I think we need to be very careful with that.
the ones that didn't come in yesterday, they really are gonna be shut off. Okay.
Yeah.
We have to do that.
We have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So we're gonna attempt it, and we'll see how the responses obviously worked. That was just cycle 4. Cycle 1 payments are due Monday, 13th, I believe, Monday the 13th. So, and that was 57 letters, so.
Is there any reason why, or any particular, whether it's gas or water, that we cannot turn off?
There is a medical, you can have medical, if somebody's on oxygen or something,
Okay.
and they bring in a medical card saying, hey, you can't. But we have to have that on file.
Because I remember reading something back a couple of years ago, there was some issues over turning off utilities, and I'm not sure.
State of Colorado doesn't have any
Okay.
winter type,
Okay.
where you can't turn them off in the winter. There's no.
If they are eligible for LEAP requires that they cannot be shut off. We're still trying to find the fine print, but it's 60 days after, and I don't know if it's after they've been approved or after their final payment. So.
And there's also the option, we're not, being totally, mean to them. There's the option they could come in and sign an agreement. You know, sometimes somebody hits hard times, well, come in and talk to us, and we'll draw up an agreement for a payment plan.
I think once that agreement is in place though, you give them a certain period of time to work toward that, and if they don't, then you.
That's correct. They have to pay their current bill and the payment that they agreed to. They can't fall behind even more, or else, right.
Do we do an individual profile on the customers as to why they find themselves? What I think is, I have occasion to see elderly folks living on a social security income, and sometimes the dollars are just not there.
Right.
And I would be hard pressed in my mind to think, well, shut them off.
Well,
You know, I mean,
one of the challenges we're running in today is, you know, everybody's recognizing more homeless people. When we're shutting power off, we're creating more of them.
right.
You know, so you gotta be aware of that all of this is a balancing act.
Wasn't that, that grant that we're talking about from ARPA, is that partly covered for power and light? Would that be help them in any way? You were
We're talking about energy efficiency.
Right, no, that's energy
It's
efficient.
energy efficiency.
So that's different.
But, you know, as rents are climbing faster than people's incomes, when the cost of the utilities is added into that, there's some people who aren't making it. But I'm not sure the utility should be a social program. So,
True.
you know, where do you cut that line? It's becomes a really tough discussion we're gonna have to get into here in the future. You know, what are our goals? If we don't want homeless people, and 83% of them are native Coloradans, it's not like they're coming in from everywhere else. They're here.
It's a byproduct of gentrification.
Yep, it really is.
Mr. Matei, you had a question there?
Should have let me ask it.
I do. So as I'm looking at the budget expense summary, we're basically looking at a $8.3 million budget for 2018. Looks like we're about almost $500,000 more than 2017. Is it basically because we're moving some of those funds over again to make sure that each entity is paying their own way again instead of pulling money from other
Is this
revenue
for
sources?
power and light? we're talking?
Yes, power and light.
We're doing more and more projects too, right?
We've
So-
got,
Right, like our distribution and operating expense went from 54,000 to 104,000.
Mhm.
Even the planned operating expense went from 31,000 to 41,000.
Well, if you look at just like we talked about earlier in the earlier.
Right, and that's why I was asking, is it reflective just like that?
A lot of these kind of costs are the same thing of allocating
Just moved over to.
the employee costs.
I'm just making sure so that way when people come up to me and ask me questions, I can tell them basically
Mhm.
with, surety, this is why this is happening. There's not really any more money or anything or less. It's just they got moved over so they could be more of a solvent entity.
Well, it's a more accurate way to account for it, so they can see what the costs of those departments are on the fund.
Okay.
But we're also, you know, in there, look at the difference in capital outlay.
Which is what's going to be one of my questions. You have $300,000 for machinery and equipment, and then you're looking at purchasing some additional equipment.
our fleet, that wasn't discussed in general fund, but, we're looking at how we're doing our fleet. I'll just say it, the past 2 years, the utilities have been paying, toward fleet.
Pretty much 100% of the fleet cost.
And not realizing any equipment. Everybody jumped on that and their needs and the fleet, we didn't get in there and get our needs met. It's an enterprise fund, and we've got to run it somewhat like a business, so in that, machinery and equipment, 200,000 is for a bucket truck to keep us whole. Our fleet is getting older and older.
Which makes sense across all departments.
Right.
Anything for machinery and equipment should be allocated to that department rather than coming out of that.
Correct.
Correct. Didn't we just approve or get a bucket truck or a snowplow or something? I thought we just got another
backhoe.
snowplow.
No, that was a backhoe.
It was a black backhoe?
Backhoe and a pickup truck, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the fire department.
No, 'cause I thought we got a.
We also got a street sweeper too, that was
Street sweeper.
Right.
beginning of the year.
Right.
But like the fleet department works well with the general fund equipment and vehicle purchases, but it really doesn't work well for trying to move money from the utilities.
That makes sense.
You know, they should balance to themselves.
So do we think that, on the expense side, because it looks like the budgeted for 17 was almost 7.9, projecting is gonna be about 7.6, and budget is 8.3, so that's partially due to machinery equipment, is what you're saying.
And part of it, you know, the fund is a little bit out of whack, and it's just gonna take us a little time to bring it back into balance.
Yeah, because your revenue is off.
But when we started looking at these funds and started taking out some of the position allocation and things like that, it started to look like they haven't been balanced in a long time.
Yeah,
And so, it's just gonna take us time to get there. We're working on it. But if you do it all in 1 year, things are gonna get real painful.
Anything else in Power and Light?
No.
Let's move on to waterfront, please.
For this year, we're splitting back out the water and sewer funds so that they're separate utilities. They should be that way anyway. They are different utilities, and I think especially where we're contracting the operation for wastewater and the plant house, we have to be able to show that number very easily to people as it balances to the revenue. And by pulling them out and separating the funds, it's really easy to come up with that.
Mr. Matei.
Yeah, just in a general sense, a comment made too, but I'm not gonna pretend to be an accountant, but it seems to me that this is an offering of greater clarity as to what each entity is doing as compared to having certain funds held in totality at a different place. It impresses me as being somewhat of a shell game. And you really don't get a whole accurate picture at a glance of where we are with the particular department and what's doing what. And I applaud you for your efforts to make this more, in my mind at least, understandable.
That is the goal.
And it seems to be working, and there's always a conversion factor. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Fletcher?
Yeah, I had one down on the chlorination, the Madrid chlorination, 5,482 last year. But this year, they don't need anything, or it's zero?
That was kind of a slush fund. We haven't had a chlorination station in Madrid for
Okay,
10, 12 years, and I was like,
Point made.
right.
so it can be done away with probably.
So we did, yes.
Okay. I was wondering about that, because, Madrid has not been there.
Yeah.
See, it was 600.
Anything else, Ms. Fletcher?
No,
Okay, good.
My question is, are we have anywhere in here where we can start allocating funds to start repairing the transmission line from the North Lake area down to Trinidad? 'Cause I know we are losing some water, which you've disclosed to us before. I see like distribution lines expense, but it doesn't seem to be much higher than it was last year, or this year I should say. It went from 100 to 125. Is that the correct line for that, or?
So we're losing water throughout the city. That distribution line item that you're looking at is just for general in-town distribution for replacing lines.
But we have a big project.
But we have big projects in the capital outlay section. And that's where, I don't know if what you have is identified by project, but,
But you're
I have-
doing this great big replacement here on First, Second, and Third Street.
Right.
And that's an expensive project.
You talk about the transmission line.
The transmission line from North Lake
Yeah,
here.
that's going to be a huge undertaking in the
Yes.
coming years, because I think I talked to you, somewhere between $12 to $15 million at the base cost. So that's gonna have to be through grants and.
Well, and it's gonna take us some time. It's a very long stretch of pipe, but we do need to start upgrading it. However, at the same time, Mike is, we just had a meeting, conference call this morning. We're gonna replace all of the meters for everything, water, power, and electric, and make them radio read meters so that they're more accurate. We'll be able to track where water loss is occurring. We'll be able to recognize things right when they happen. The tracking of power is going to be important because we're kind of missing a substantial amount of power, and it will show up with those types, with that software and those meters that we can't do right now.
You know, one big, don't wanna get off the subject too much here, but just, they say that one water leak that we have coming down on Santa Fe Trail is pretty good size.
That is correct.
And I'm not sure.
That's in the,
Okay,
in the 2018.
In the capital outlay?
okay.
Yes.
To Mayor Rico's point, do we have any idea how, well, at one point the numbers were, we processed 1 million gallons of water. By the time I turned on my faucet, I got 600,000 to work with. So we're losing like 400,000. Is that in the transmission line or is it in the distribution line around town? Or do we know?
It's in
Both.
It's in both, and in meters that we have in our system from the 1920s that, you know, the little propeller just got tired and we're not getting accurate reads.
People don't notify you when they're not paying for as much funds.
No, you wouldn't do that, right?
So it's a overall system. We have brought that number down. We found that the Valdez leak was substantial.
Right.
We're roughly about 900,000 to 1 million gallons from the Madrid meter to the treatment plant. I don't think that people are using 1 million gallons. We're in the process of just taking bites at it as we can.
But the reason I ask is to Councilman Lopez's point. If we can prioritize where the greater leaks seem to be, then we could maybe invest our resources there first. But it seems like it's like everywhere.
It's also a combination too. When you try to compare one great big meter where the water's coming out at the treatment plant
Got it.
to the 4,000 meters that are operating in town, the numbers don't compare.
Right.
They just never will.
So with the upgrades, that should, one, give us a better grasp of where water is, how much is actually being consumed, and then two, then we can start to realistically tackle where we have these infrastructural issues along the transmission line from there to
That will
here.
help us get better.
Yeah.
Another thing we should probably be doing, I don't know how long it's been since there was a leak detection thing.
It's been a while.
But that's something we should do occasionally. There's a company that comes and they can, through the equipment, they can tell you where the leaks are.
And to that point, if we're having meters that do a better job of reading, some people can probably expect an increase.
Probably.
If they're using water now that they're not paying for, and others may expect a decrease if they're being accurately charged for that which they do.
The last time I did a meter change out program, it was a $70,000 revenue enhancement.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty substantial.
Going back to the electric meters, a couple of years ago, I remember talking with Ron Clogfelter, the operating committee, and he was trying to put together a volume.
We went through that process, and not all communities could get together, so we just decided to branch off and do our own. It's a substantial cost to change all the meters, electric, gas, and water especially, because there's plumbing and tearing that apart. So what the conference call we had was with the Colorado Energy Office and possibly doing a performance-based contract where we get the total city done at one time, rather than trying to do a pilot project. But yes, we did look into that.
I'm just worried about that, what Carlos said about that transmission line from North Lake down. It's been kind of on our problem for how many years now, and we lose 40% of our water. It's a pretty serious problem, and what I just heard there, what Mike said is, well, we're gonna look at it when we get a chance, or whatever you said on that part about getting money or funded. Didn't we get any money from DOLA for that repair on that
It
line?
wasn't for the transmission line, it was for the lines in town, the old cast iron lines in town. and we're in the engineering process now.
That would be a totally separate project.
Right.
To apply for funds for.
Right.
I think we better look at that a little bit more closely, because with all the marijuana stuff we have in our town and the water coming through, that's a lot of water that we're gonna have to look at, so that's all I have to say.
Question I had is just, the miscellaneous job, can you kind of explain that?
If we have, where our crews go out and actually do some of the work, and we charge for that work, that's the line item where we,
We were also, just out of curiosity, then, this is for this year, we projected a grant revenue of $525,000, but there's nothing projected. I guess we didn't do anything on that. That's kind of late in the season.
that's probably, the split from the $3 million grant. We're trying to project when we draw it down from DOLA. So.
I looked at the Conservancy District, an increase of almost 20,000?
Which I'm sorry.
Conservancy District budget?
There is some rumblings, and that's just me taking a best shot, for the operation of the district, Purgatory River Conservancy District, and, maintenance on the Trinidad Dam. They have to pay their certain amount. We have a contract, and I don't want to get too deep into it now because we're not sure, but they're talking about negotiating that contract because O&M costs keep going up on them, and we pay, to them alone, we pay $30,000 a year. And that's been going on since 1980, and it hasn't changed. They're looking at changing that, but there's some negotiations that have to happen. I just anticipated.
I wasn't clear, the grant revenue is 525?
Cheryl just clarified it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was the remainder of the water treatment plant grant, but we actually
Deobligated, because we are more efficient with the design of how it happens, so. Yep.
Also with the DOLA grants, they aren't paying for replacement of the utility lines, they'll pay for repair and replacement of the street. They refuse to fund utilities.
And it looks like you're projecting going after some more DOLA infrastructure grants, it looks like. That the capital outlay, 5370.
That's it. I thought you were asking about that. That's where we didn't expend that this year.
Oh.
So that, and when we asked for a drawdown, that's when it's coming in.
Okay.
We projected to come in.
So looking at this, we got 6.4.
Generally with the utility funds, though, we're playing some catch-up. So we're allowing them to keep some of the revenue they had from previous years instead of transferring it out and trying to play some catch-up for some of the projects.
You're gonna see that our capital outlay in water is big ticket.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. We've gotta catch up, and we have it in reserves, and we've just gotta get after our infrastructure, and that's part of it.
Any other questions on the water fund? Okay, let's go on to gas fund. Mr. Donato, do you have any questions? Smith?
I do. The big variation in charges for services, is that because of this reserves return?
Yes, that's exactly right, the deferred, our gas supply charge.
So we overcharged, now we undercharge.
We're trying to catch up, that is correct, and
That'll be good news for the citizens.
It is,
Right.
I'll be coming to you,
This
on
upcoming
Wednesday
meeting.
with an ordinance, or our consultant analyzed it one more time, and it's good news.
So they'll definitely feel the effects of, I'm sorry,
So could you tell them to keep Don out there, please?
they'll feel the effects of that come February then, right?
It should go into effect, we have 2 readings December 1st, so when it gets cold and they're using more gas, it won't be a hard hit, and it may even be less, because we've got to bring that in.
I mean, I noticed, I was watching, cable or public television in Colorado Springs the other night, and they're decreasing their gas, or, you know,
Yeah,
price too.
Yep, natural gas is cheaper to purchase. We just try and, that gas purchase is a pass-through. And it's hard to predict and project what we charge, so, you know, it's a way we're trying to keep it in that range.
The only thing bad about that, of course, decreasing is, we, you know, the loss of revenue going into, so we can use capital stuff down the road. That's the only issue. It goes one to the other.
Yeah.
That's the loss.
Yep.
Any questions, Mr.
But the same token, it also costs us less too,
Yeah.
so it's kind of a wash.
Right.
I think that was the subject of a lawsuit some years
Yes, it
ago.
was.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago or something like that.
The only other question I had regarding was the budget expense. And I'm sure it's corollary, where it's gonna be under gas purchases. Oh yeah, never mind, I answered my own question,
Yep.
sorry.
Yep.
I have nothing more.
This might have been answered before, but looking at all the utility funds, the capital outlay from each one of these is separate from the overall capital project. Okay. The capital projects are different from what each utility is.
Yes, the utilities, again, they're enterprise zones, and so we have capital projects in there. Are you talking about the CIP?
You mean the sales tax?
Sales
Yeah.
tax 1 cent,
Yeah.
yes, those are totally separate.
Okay. Then that's all.
I'm good. You good? You know, just the reflection again, there again, the bad debts and the gas fund is pretty sizable. Something that I've noticed, of course, and maybe this because of the allocation, I've been noticing as we go along with each one of the utilities and the funds, the wages increases. Is that from the allocation? Are we seeing some of these increases in here?
So rather than doing the position allocation, the wage increases for everybody who's related to utilities is in the utility funds. The meter readers, the clerks downstairs collecting money for the utilities, so
That's where
that's where that
increases.
bumps up, yes.
That's pretty well balanced out there. The only thing I could see, and this is concerning this year, is projected on the gas fund was 4.6. Expenses, no, actually, I was thinking backwards. Okay. Right. Any other questions on the gas fund?
No, sir.
Sewer fund?
I said you, on the wages that you were talking about
Yeah.
under the water fund, it's about a 20% increase. And that's, you just said that's not due to the position allocation, right? We're running between 450 and 540. 2017 projected is 511, but the 18 budget is 643 plus an increase in overtime.
You said water?
Yeah, this water. In the general administration, the detail.
Yeah, it's, I'm seeing that now. We're gonna have to look at that. I think it is
Is that
that
additional
we.
personnel or something?
No, well, additional personnel would be in adding the meter readers and the clerks and everything in there. They
You
were,
think that would make everything net go down?
before they were under finance, I think they should stay there. No, I'm kidding. So we're,
If they were under finance, that makes sense, then why that number went up.
right,
Okay, so it's like a position allocation.
Actually,
One department absorbed somebody else's budget.
something else that we're not
so
seeing.
if we're looking at the water, do you don't have that?
It's line item 1001.
And you're in the water department, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
This.
Do you see
It has to do with, the sewer. So the salary, wait, what are you comparing, 17 and 18?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 17 budget accounted for sewer department employees because we blended the fund, water sewer. But 18, it should have decreased,
You
right?
should have.
Yeah.
Just check on
Yeah,
that.
We're gonna have to look at that and, that's a good point.
Pulling those funds apart has been a lot of work.
It was awful.
It wasn't as clear cut as you would think. Right.
No, let's put them back together next year.
I told Audra this morning, if anybody asks, say no.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the sewer fund. Mr. Brown, you have any questions? Huh? No, that's good.
I'll bring forward now, the contract we have with CH2M year is a 5-year contract, which is looked at every year. They have increased it by, is it 0.1%? Basically, 1.198869 to 1.219549. And that was in the contract, it's basically cost of living
Right.
and
So is that weird formula that they had, or?
yeah, and we didn't have to go to the formula because they came in, way low.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember we went back and forth on that
Yeah.
Yeah.
crazy formula.
It's an increase of 20,000.
I was just gonna ask, I asked the city manager about this, CHM2 and new company buying CHM2 out. And, Mr. Sun response was that they were consolidated. But right now, it's my understanding that, I think it's Flint Company or something like that bought this company out, or
Jacobs.
Jacobs has bought this company out. So, how's that gonna, maybe if I could ask that, how's that gonna work out in the future with us now? Since we already have a 5-year contract with these people, how are we gonna work this out with this new company coming in?
It doesn't change anything.
It doesn't really change
I didn't
anything.
know.
It's CH2M is a subsidiary of Jacobs now.
When you
So
look
it's-
at, when you look at, when there's an outright buyout versus a merger, and from what I understand, this is more of a merger.
Because
This is
both of
a
them are,
No,
the
it's
new
not a buyout, it's a merger.
organization is keeping
There's a
both
difference.
names.
Did you read those papers that said that
This is not a buyout issue.
But I'm just asking,
No, I'm just.
cause what kind of effects it's gonna have, that's all I'm asking.
For my point was, for this purpose, this is not a budget issue.
Yeah.
My experience is in those kind of combinations, you
Okay,
can't
go
share
ahead.
obligations. So-
Go ahead.
Well, as looking at the utilities, generally speaking, in starting with water, then gas, general administration tracks pretty consistent. Yet in sewer, there's a significant drop.
Correct.
In 2018 as compared to what 16 and 17 have been. Could that be attributed to CH?
That is.
He
So-
said it was.
The salaries.
Right, all the salaries are taken out.
that are taken out of there. So the city realizes significant savings, basically.
Kind of,
Well,
because we still have to pay them
You still
to
have to-
manage.
Right.
I understand that.
We did receive a savings of about $100,000 when the last time you updated us, correct? From
Correct.
their time of acquiring to that point.
To that point in time.
It was about $100,000 in savings after the fact that we were paying them to manage it, yet we did not no longer have those salaries, et cetera, that we were paying out on our own.
Yeah.
Plus the overtime and everything else.
The overtime was a significant issue as well.
Mm-hmm.
Plus,
And
a part of what we pay them is money that they're supposed to invest in the system, and if they don't spend it, it stays in their coffers.
That's right.
Right.
There's $100,000 allocated for equipment, maintenance and repair and purchase. To date, year to date, they're about 80,000, so we're anticipating, barring anything happening, that we have a $20,000 rebate on that 100,000.
Good to know.
That's built into every year. So,
So if the budget holds true, if you look, my numbers are a tiny bit different than yours because I've been tweaking them over the past few days, but the 2016 actual expense for sewer was 2.1, and we're projecting 1.9 expense in 2018. And that includes us being able to allocate salaries of the utility department, the meter readers. Sewer department never contributed to help with salaries because it was always upside down. So we've taken away the loan payment, and we're able to build in the the salaries of the utility department employees, as well as pilot service reimbursement. So, and that's about $191,000. So sewer's finally able to play.
Well, one of the good things too is, we increased sewer rates last year. So at some point, it'll allow us to start building that fund so that in case we have to do any capital stuff down the road and get rid of this payment, it'll start building a fund for us.
And that's why we're recommending paying off the plant this year, because it will help balance this fund.
So I think it's just the interest alone is
Mhm.
substantial. The outside contract services on that, we have projection this year of 1.2. What kind of services,
that'd be the CH2M
That's right,
contract.
okay.
Yeah.
That's right, okay. Anything else on sewer department? And for all sakes and purposes, I just, we just need to get good clarification for Mr. Bernardo's question.
Mhm. But the fact that the new firm retains the names of both of the old ones tells you it's more of a merger than it is a takeover.
Right.
If it was a takeover, they would not retain CH2M.
So therefore, in logic, they would have to uphold their contract with us through this particular
Well,
exchange.
if it was a buyout, we clearly would have to have a new contract with the new
Right.
firm. I'm not sure that we have to do it now, but I want to make sure from a legal standpoint that's true.
But they don't get to get out of any of
No.
their obligations just by getting bought out.
No, but when if it was a buyout, it's not that they get out of the obligations, it's more that we now have a contract with a different firm. But in this case, I'm not sure that's really true, because the original one still
That's what
exists.
those other papers said.
It's kind of like if they wanted to go and sub this to some other firm, they would have to come to the city and
They
say
would
we're
have to come to
subbing.
the city, exactly.
Right.
And this would be the same type of thing. If they were selling out entirely, they would have to come and say, this is the new firm that would be taking over the contract.
I'll give you a good example, from that is, coming from the building construction industry side that I see is we see mergers constantly. Take Black & Decker, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They buy, the other day, matter of fact, I met somebody from Black & Decker just a week ago, and they have done like 200 or 300 mergers over the past several years. But those individual companies retain their name, and I think that's what this is.
And just to clarify, we still own the plant, we
Exactly.
still
Yes,
set
we
the
do.
rates, it's just operation and maintenance.
That's all it is.
So,
Okay.
Okay, let's go on to capital, projects then, please. Mr. McKay,
Yes, no, I'm good.
Ms. Fleischer.
Come back to me, I did have a question.
No, I think everything is looking pretty good. We're on track with where we started. We're actually under from last year in terms of the budget, which is kind of sad, but I think it's because we're not getting as much revenue in as of right now that we have from DOLA or something like that. That could be coming through potentially down the road, but I did have for capital budgets, okay, under land for the expense portion. In 2017, the total land was $959,000. I'm guessing those were from prices that we paid? And then this year we're expecting $93,000 to pay
No,
out?
that's the expense side. So the
Right.
$959,000 we budgeted, it was for the pedestrian bridge grant, and we just put it in the wrong spot. So we actually need to move it to the pedestrian bridge expense, which is below. So
Okay.
anyway, that's part of a grant, correct?
We have under the land portion, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, but I'm assuming it's the $286,000 Old Soapers Trail acquisition phase 2 grant?
Correct.
Correct, so that's what you're seeing in this year, and that will probably cross between this year and next year.
We were hoping to make that final purchase before
We
the
were.
end of the year.
We're hoping, but we're,
So with that being said, also the Boulevard Edition Phase 1 does not have a line item for it. Is that being put on the back burner as well?
Boulevard Edition Phase 1, that acquisition has been completed.
Okay then.
We're actually building trails in that now, so we're actually acquiring Phase 2.
Okay.
And Cheryl is correct, that's adjacent to the pedestrian bridge project,
Right.
which isn't an acquisition project, it's a construction project.
Okay. Just that's.
Lots of good stuff going on down there.
I remembered my question.
I think that was all I had.
Next question?
Yeah, my question was, the waterworks building with ZIP in it, that's because that's coming out of marijuana, right? The 100,000?
Yes.
Okay.
What are we doing at Hughes Lumber, remind me?
Yeah,
Um,
that's one question.
we,
Because it was gonna be Noah's Ark, and it's not Noah's Ark.
yeah, well, now it's our building. It's gonna retain our building at this point. But we recently received the historic, architectural drawings for restoring the facade of the building. And so we're looking at doing that work to improve the front, probably do some tuck pointing to the building, just general preservation and upgrade look to it. Because we will probably get rid of it at some point, but we want to make sure that it's in good shape when we do that.
So we have completed 2 grants on that building, the historic structural assessment, which Mr. Feinberg did, and then this last year, Greg's absolutely correct. We just completed the construction documents. When we met with History Colorado, they indicated, and they do remind us when they've made a little bit of an investment, they're anxious to make more investment, so we'll be able to leverage some of our
Did that
funding.
require a match, or?
It is, and it's built into the grant. So
Okay,
part of that is
we're spending $400,000 on Hughes Lumber, or?
we will receive $200,000 from History Colorado, so the line item has $500,000 in it. That would be a $300,000 expense on the city side and a $200,000 grant from History Colorado. And that is if we decide to do the project at the largest scope. We could do a smaller scope, ask for a smaller match.
Because I know we've been talking about that Hughes Lumber building forever, for my entire time on council, and we can never figure out a good use for it. Is this a good
Well,
use?
the weirdest thing that's going on right now is I think I have 4 parties that have contacted me in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They want the building.
We've got a lot of
Yeah, so all of a sudden
anxiousness
it's
right now.
become a target. So what we're looking at is,
Is it
hmm?
marijuana money, or?
No.
No.
One of them was a conversation with the college. One of them was a conversation with someone from Denver. I think 2 people from Denver.
3 after my meetings last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you think it's a good expense?
Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna be asking.
Yeah, is it better just to sell it, or?
Return on our investment overall, you know, and it sounds like it's moving in that direction.
So the construction documents illustrate just a fantastic facade that would take it back to that original facade, similar to what we're doing with some of the other projects that we have. It would
It
make
would
the
look more
value of the
storefront,
building.
it would look like a storefront, the big glass windows.
So that money is all for exterior, it's not for tenant finish. I assume if someone's coming in, they would cover that expense.
So it's a total of 300 from the city and 200 from the
If we do
state.
the large, if we do the large complete
Up to
project.
300 from the city.
Mr. Dodd, I have a question. Something that's not in your, I talked to Greg about this, and, GOCO money is out there, that, gonna be all right?
I think so.
Because I know that, they've expressed that we need to go after more money from GOCO. So I think that's just something to keep in the back of our minds, that I think we'll need to go after.
Yeah, I think there's potential for a lot of projects that we need to coordinate in terms of recreation improvement and land purchase, and they're definitely one of the funding partners out there.
One thing I was gonna ask, and I'm not sure if this would fall under this, what about the Chaffa tax credits? How is that going to fit into?
So chapel tax credits are actually, will be allocated to art space.
Okay.
So art space will, when the partnership is formed, art space will loan that money into the partnership as we will our DOLA grant, which is, in the budget.
Okay, I was just kind of wondering where that would fall.
Sure.
Good answer.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
I see that we have under street improvements, a Cedar Street extension and restroom. Where is that intended to go? You have a $75,000 expense for 2018?
So that's remaining, that's the restroom portion of that. The Cedar Street extension has been completed. And we're still talking about exactly where those restrooms will go. Greg, unless you.
Give or take right down in that area though.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
We also received an interesting email a couple days ago from one of the people associated with Kip Hamden, who have some experience with what's been going on in Denver. And he suggested before we put in another public bathroom, we should maybe look at how they're controlling their public bathrooms, because they've had some problems.
Because I remember we were talking about putting a public restroom in the parking lot, the municipal parking lot, just south of Elm Street there on Commercial. And I don't know if that's kind of gone.
Well, we don't want to get it too far out of the business district.
Right, but I mean, that one is right where it should be. Now this new one, that's why I was asking.
This funding is the project that you're referencing. It's the same project. It's the location of restrooms on that commercial street.
So it'd be
area.
multiple then, I'm guessing.
No, it's
No,
one
it's
project.
two.
If I may,
Thanks, Tom.
if I may, counsel, we have gone out to bid for that building, and that building has actually been awarded. We're currently working on, because I came to you guys before with team, with different roofing structures and different siding options and stuff to make it look more authentic and more historic. The current project, the building has been awarded. They're just waiting for us to say, go ahead and build it. And it will go in that corner of Elm Street. We're just trying to make sure the final orientation of the corner and what we're going to have to do with ADA compliance to make sure we can get people in and out and to not mess up the sidewalk on Elm Street, which will be kind of just a sticking point at this point. So make sure we get it right. That's where we're at with that building.
Okay. But that's not with the same amount for the Cedar Street extension one though, or is it?
We're
That is-
budgeting it.
Okay, so maybe it's just worded.
That's where Mr. England had put the money, was in Cedar Street Extension.
Ah, okay, now I understand. That clarifies it for me.
And then the bid came in higher than 60,000.
Okay.
I was noticing that, we have $1.5 million basically for ADA, improvements between the buildings and the street, I guess.
Yeah, it's gonna be a significant dedication of funds for the near future.
If they actually move the decimal point, that would be getting closer.
Well, I think we talked that in the long run, it could cost us up to what, $15 million or close to that, when it's all said and done.
That's just sidewalks and curb cuts. That's not counting buildings and all the other kind of access.
Look at the Corazon Square improvements. Is that building ours? You can explain.
So the DOLA can only grant funding from CBDG to municipalities and counties. And we in 2013, went into an agreement with the Housing Authority that we would be the pass-through agency for that CBDG grant. So the way that works is Ms. Rosemary Shire manages the grant. She submits the reports to the city and the reimbursement requests. We fulfill that obligation by reporting to DOLA when the funding comes in. Cheryl takes care of bringing it through our system and back to the Housing
So
Authority.
she's planning on doing some renovations or grants or whatever?
They are. They're doing a full renovation, yes.
Who actually owns that building, Tara? Does the city or does HUD? Or
I
who?
would have to defer to Auditor and Mike
I
on
don't think
that.
there's anything on
I
record.
believe it's the Trinidad Housing Authority is.
The housing authority itself owned the building.
It was
Yes,
probably
correct.
funded through a HUD grant of some sort, and it may be paid off by now.
Actually, Mayor, that expense should be offset in the revenue side, the same exact amount, I just didn't put it in there. And honestly, capital is we still need to work on it quite a bit. Tara and I need to go through the grants to figure out what we've expended, what we need to carry forward, and what we anticipate coming in. So capital is gonna be kind of last minute with the grant information.
Lottery fund, like I said, there's not much to discuss there, other than did I hear they were gonna increase some of the lottery costs or some of the ticket sales? I'm not sure about that. Something about the lottery thing that did going on. It was interesting.
What, the lottery fund is now maintaining part of the golf course? Is that right?
Actually, what happened is $25,000 was approved for the golf course for capital improvements.
Right.
But what they're doing is not capital improvements. They bought some kind of computer to maintain the sprinkler system, and that's not considered capital because it's equipment, so we had to put it into lottery. And then all their other jobs are less than $5,000, so to be able to be put in the capital budget, they have to reach that threshold of $5,000 per project. And they just can't find those kind of projects, I guess.
At the same time, we're doing some pretty large projects at the golf course that can
Well, we're
qualify
doing
as capital.
Doing the whole,
Yeah.
I don't think we agreed on the new carts.
Well, they're in there.
Well, I just keep seeing them in there. We also have a lot of money for SCRT, which is controversial too.
That's true.
So I assume that's not written
No,
in.
none of those are, not yet.
Okay, you haven't approved the 2018 allocation of that money yet.
Yeah.
Tourism fund. Any questions? I think the biggest thing there is, cause you have that's principal. Was that on the trolley, but if we paid off
Yes,
then?
we're gonna move it out, so actually tourism will be solvent to $25.
Jonathan's.
And that includes the welcome
I'll
center
spend it.
staff and
Right.
expense.
Okay.
Where is the trolley in here?
We're paying it off.
But I mean, I don't see it in the tourism fund.
It would be loan or debt service or principal and interest toward the bottom.
At 288,000, yeah, 288,912 for 2017, that's projected.
Under the tourism fund.
Right,
I actually like machinery and equipment.
yeah.
Principal and interest.
So you go down below that, you have machinery and equipment,
That's like it's right here.
and that's what she's talking about, paying it off.
Okay, I'm looking at the old paper now, not the one today.
But actually, the old paper, the principal and interest has been, well, I'm not sure on that copy if you've removed it yet, 'cause we haven't
Yeah,
talked
it's there,
about
it says 38,000 for principal and
Yeah.
interest is 6,006.
Yeah, that's the old one then.
No, this is for 20, yeah, this is the old one, but it's on the old one.
And then it's not on the new one.
It's not,
And why isn't it?
because it sounds like we're gonna pay off the trolley with marijuana money.
Okay.
funds.
And that helps, that makes the fund solvent by
Yeah.
not having that out there.
And then you'll be presented with the final tourism budget after next Wednesday. They were just informed last week, as was I, that there's a potential that this could be paid off with marijuana monies. I mean, this has been a discussion, but no firm commitments, and so they're gonna have to reallocate that $42,000.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, did anybody want to discuss the 4-year projection for the capital projects fund? Did you get that?
Yeah, I got that.
Any questions on that?
I think it's just placeholders now at this point.
What does it look like?
About 4 years out, what if like that?
No.
On the last page of it.
Okay, I got it.
Couple of things we put in there for like parks and playgrounds. What we're suggesting is doing some improvements that make some meaningful differences, like for the playground equipment, putting that rubber floor barrier at the bottom instead of the sand, because it's far safer than the sand is, or chips or whatever's out there. And some of those can make some substantial safety improvements without a horribly large expense, but it can make a big difference, so that's why we put it in there.
Anything else concerning the budget you want to bring forward?
I do. So I'm going to go back to my earlier comment regarding terra firma. If we're going to get into like miscellaneous, because it wasn't listed in this big packet I received last month, I would like to see some more funding go towards that entity, because they do provide a community service, which in the long run will give us more longevity on our landfill, which helps us start having more time to save for when we decommission, which is about a $3.7 to $4 million elephant in the room.
What I'd really like to suggest with that is, we're still working on splitting the landfill operation out from the general fund. When we can do that, I think that's really where we can start doing those types of expenses. But right now, it would be a general fund expense.
Okay, well,
we don't have really a lot of room in the general fund.
Well, if we could do something, because they used to be a line item before, I do believe that they provide a community service that it doesn't cost anyone to take their things out there, and you know, they provide a recycling service to the community. The other thing I would like to ask is that now that the Urban Forestry Board has transitioned from the Tree Board, they have taken on more responsibilities as well as more projects. I feel that brings more revenue. They last year were given $4,000 in the other section of the miscellaneous budget detail. I would like to get them up to $10,000, as they have plans to bring on a potential 1 or 2 interns from CSU, and that will help them provide residency at the dormitories at TSJC, also for more planting materials, as well as training for, if not maybe even getting a horticultural staff member that is dedicated and likes to do horticulture or botany. They proposed their budget to Greg and I. I think that we could provide some of the services from our staff, but Greg has brought forward that maybe it'd be better if we have someone that actually likes to do that type of work, that will take more notice instead of just ripping plants out.
I think we need to move toward having a horticulturalist, or working with the extension service. If they can get somebody like that, we could share a position, but that's a field where people know what they're talking about with plants and trees, and they can make a big difference in how everything is maintained. They could just, you know, that person every day would take 1 or 2 people out, and those people would work with them, but the person who knows what they're doing would be the one making the decisions about what gets done.
So with that being said, Jennifer Ledig, the president of that board, discussed with us and showed us how she was able to attain about $5,000 worth of in-kind services from volunteers, etc. They were also attain another grant from CDC, I believe, or CTC, which is now going to take place, where they're going to move the trees in the nursery over to Central Park and that planting is happening next weekend. They just marked everywhere where they're gonna put their plants, but I feel that with the enhanced responsibility, we should give them a little bit more money. They did ask originally for $20,000. I would like to see them at 10. Decent, and that's an increase of $6,000 from where they were last year, considering that they have been able to turn what they had into more with less.
If I may, they were allocated $4,000 this year and they never drew. They did not draw on it. So I don't know what.
They pulled some of the monies though to buy all the plants that they put in the roundabout and the,
That was granted to them by Main Street, so that came out of the Main Street line item. That was part of the Main Street grant from DOLA to
okay.
do flowers around. So the Main Street Board asked the Urban Forestry Board if they would do that and gave them the money for that. And so that expenditure came out of the Main Street line item.
Okay.
Also, they received a $2,000 donation, which is also sitting for this year, and they haven't used any, or haven't expensed for any.
Because I was under the impression that from what they told me that they pulled the money from their potential, or their budget that they were given monies from.
Right, that's what my understanding was too, but the 4,000 that's in here will be part of this Colorado Tree Coalition that Councilman Lopez was just talking about, that they're planting that they're going to be doing this month. So that's where a lot of that, most of that probably will go to.
Right.
That's why that's
Exhausted. Because that was part of a partial match from the CTC.
We can just kind of do a little wrap up, but the big elephant in the room here is, where do you anticipate, are you been in discussion with the union, anything with wages that we are anticipating?
We have not come to an agreement yet with wages. I'm hoping that the amount we set aside to cover increased employment expenses, including health insurance, that between how much we set aside and how much health insurance is going to cost us will probably give us the amount of money we need to cover adjustments in wages. However, we're also trying to implement the pay study, and that will take us some time to get that done. There's several people who are not on the scale at all. It's done what the grade was that was assigned to them through the study. So we're planning to take about 3 years and bring those people up to the scale, and then we can start making adjustments on the scale.
How was that being received by the unions?
So far, that part of it, they haven't objected to it at all. As I said, we're still quite a ways apart on what they're asking for a pay adjustment and what I've offered for a pay adjustment, but we'll figure that out.
Okay, so the other things that we probably need, going back to when we first started our discussion tonight, kind of a review, is bringing forward the ADA and how we're going to handle those large ticket items and how we're going to handle the small ticket items.
With the $20,000 that was granted through the Community Foundation this year, as we talked about a little while ago, we could take the $7,000 for ADA, $7,000 for the Youth Council, and budget those directly, and then have the Community Foundation grant the remaining $6,000.
Okay, and then like I said, he had something about the tree board. The one big question that I had, and I noticed that every 2 weeks when we get our budget concerning wages, and I see where the police department always has an exceptional amount of time overtime. And is it because we are understaffed partially, or what's the reason?
We have, what concerns me, an unwritten agreement with the hospital where we're providing coverage for 12 hours a day, and they're reimbursing us the total cost of those employees.
Oh, okay.
But I've expressed some concerns because we have people that are working 20 and 30 hours of overtime a week, and I just don't think that's very safe.
Not enough time in the day.
No.
And that, like I said, I look at this overtime and I always question it, why is it so high?
And that's what it is. Most of it's because of the hospital coverage.
Okay.
And I have had some conversations with Mr. Tucker, and we're kind of working through that.
So wait a minute, the hospital's paying the overtime time and a half?
Yep, plus some of the, whatever the benefit costs are too.
Ooh, that's pretty hefty on the hospitals. Yeah.
Anything else you need from us, Rick?
I don't think so at this point. We'll take this input and see what we can do to fit these things in, the budget and come back to you and,
Like I was saying, if there's things that you cannot do, it is what it is.
okay.
Mr. Rico, I can say something. Today I attended a meeting at Mount Carmel. It was for child care and upbringing with autistic children and stuff like that. And I didn't see Mr. Murphy there today. I don't know if you weren't invited, but a lot of people approached me, Tom, and asked me if we would have been there. And I think that's an important factor, like when he was talking about being on this TV deal and stuff like that. He's well known in the community, he's been doing this for us. And when you get people from Colorado Springs asking me or asking my daughter, Mr. Murphy, I don't know if you got invited to that.
Yeah, I didn't know about it.
Because it would have been nice if you'd have been there, but I just wanted to say that's what Mr. Murphy does, and I think you have a good idea there.
I think that's one
Thank you,
area,
Tom.
like you mentioned, is like, how do we fit his request in?
We'll try to figure that out too, so.
Because, you know, he does provide a very,
Very valuable.
very
Oh,
good
yeah.
value, transparency wise. And so I think it's,
Can I just say one thing? I said this to Mr. Matei when we interviewed. I said, the reason I've done this is, it wasn't because I didn't make money, but I made a difference. And the paper did that too. And so it's like, I'm part of this community too. And if Trinidad does well, I'll do well. That's what it's about.
I think that we're in the information revolution, and it's technology based, and it certainly provides transparency in government and other government supported entities. And most importantly, it creates public partnerships to get the pertinent information to those who need to know.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheryl, thank you. Thanks,
Yes,
Cheryl.
thank you, everybody.
We were sweating there for a little while.
Well, I'm not used to you yet, but it'll be better next time.
It's just out here. It is kind of warm in there.
Sure.
I'll see you tomorrow, Greg.
Probably all of the,
Come on.
Color remarks. It's time to go back to the meeting.
Meeting's at-
For the-
well, I'm sorry,